So, are Gen Z happier than millennials? It seems like a pretty straightforward question, right? But when you start digging into the data, you uncover this really complex and honestly kind of worrying story about well-being, money, and what it even means to be young today. So let's peel back the layers and see what's really going on. For basically as long as anyone's been asking this question, if you wanted to know who the happiest people in society were, the answer was always the same.
Yep, the young. It was practically a law of nature, wasn't it? Youth was supposed to be synonymous with happiness, with potential, with well-being.
Except it's just not true anymore. Not even close. In fact, that entire idea has been flipped completely upside down.
Okay, so let's dive into what's happening here. Researchers are actually calling this the Great Happiness Inversion, and it's a pretty big deal.
First off, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. When we say millennials, we're talking about folks born roughly between 1981 and 1996. And Gen Z? That's the generation born between 1997 and 2012. Two very distinct groups shaped by very different worlds. See, for ages, happiness was thought to follow this predictable U-shaped curve. You start out pretty happy when you're young, then things dip in middle age, mortgages, careers, the whole deal, and then happiness climbs back up in your golden years. It just made sense. Well, that U-shape, it's gone. It's completely collapsed. In many Western nations, it's now just a straight line going up. The older you get, the happier you are. Which means, the young are now at the very bottom of the happiness ladder. The question is, what on earth happened?
All right, the first and, let's be honest, the most obvious clue is something that hits both of these generations right where they live, a constant, grinding financial struggle. Get this, a staggering 48% of Gen Z say they do not feel financially secure. I mean, that is almost half of an entire generation feeling like they're starting out on incredibly shaky ground. And what about millennials? It's pretty much the same story, 46%. Almost identical. You have to remember, many of them walked straight into the Great Recession, and it feels like that economic storm cloud has just never really gone away. And if you think that's bad, it actually gets worse. More than half of both Gen Z and millennials are living paycheck to paycheck. This isn't about saving for a rainy day. For many, it's about just surviving until the next one. So here's the crucial point. This constant money stress, it's like the toxic foundation they're both standing on. But, and this is a huge but, if they're both feeling the same financial pain, that can't be the thing that explains why Gen Z is so much less happy. There has to be something else going on. We've got to dig deeper.
And to find that something else, we need to look past the bank accounts and into the unique psychological pressures that seem to be weighing specifically on Gen Z.
And the data really paints the picture here. It's clear as day. 40% of Gen Z feels stressed or anxious all or most of the time, compared to 34% of millennials. When you ask them to rate their own mental well-being, only 52% of Gen Z say it's good, versus 58% of millennials. It's this consistent 6-point gap, a gap in distress. This is where we really get to the heart of it. This is the why. Yeah, financial worries are huge at 56%. But look what's even higher, a lack of purpose at 58%. Then you've got intense achievement pressure, feeling like they don't matter, and profound loneliness. This isn't just about being broke, it's an existential crisis.
And then, of course, there's the one thing that touches all of this, technology. Now, it's not the single cause of these feelings, but it's like a giant megaphone, amplifying everything else.
The key difference here isn't that they use social media, it's when they started. Millennials, for the most part, adapted to it as young adults, with their identities pretty much formed. But Gen Z was fully immersed during their most crucial, vulnerable adolescent years. Their brains were literally developing inside this ecosystem of constant comparison, curation, and performance. So you add it all up, the financial pressure, the existential dread, the social media amplifier, and it's really easy to just throw your hands up and say, well, I guess being young and unhappy is just the new normal. But is it really inevitable? This is so fascinating. It turns out this youth happiness crisis is not a universal thing, not at all. In North America, older people are vastly happier than the young. But then you look at Central and Eastern Europe, and the whole thing is flipped on its head. The young are far happier than the old. So this isn't just about technology, it's about the societies we build.
And if you need one final piece of proof, just look at Lithuania. It's now ranked as the happiest country on earth for people under 30. This proves youth unhappiness isn't some global fate. It's a reflection of societal choices, priorities, and support systems.
So what's the final diagnosis? Well, the evidence is clear. Gen Z is less happy than millennials. While both are crushed by financial pain, Gen Z is uniquely burdened by a crisis of purpose and connection, amplified by the digital world they grew up in. And crucially, this is a structural problem, not some unavoidable destiny. Which leaves us with the final, most important question. If the systems we live in, our economic policies, our social safety nets, our community structures, are failing the young this badly, what will it actually take to rebuild them into something that fosters well-being instead of dismantling it?